The morning fog hung thick over Heathrow Airport as Camilla, Queen Consort of England, stepped out of the black Bentley. Her designer luggage followed behind her, carried by two royal attendants. She wore dark sunglasses and a simple navy coat, trying to blend in with other travelers. But nothing about this trip was ordinary. 3 months had passed since the terrible argument with King Charles. The stress of royal duties, constant media attention, and the weight of the crown had taken its toll on their marriage. Camilla felt trapped in a golden cage. She needed space to breathe, to think, to remember who she was before becoming royalty. Her sister Annabelle had called from Australia 2 weeks ago. "Come stay with me for a while," she had said. "The beaches here are beautiful and nobody will bother you. You can just be Camilla again, not the Queen Consort." The offer felt like a lifeline to a drowning woman. Charles had been in Scotland on royal business when Camilla made her decision. She left him a handwritten letter on his desk, explaining that she needed time away. She didn't tell him where she was going or when she might return. Perhaps it was cruel, but she felt she had no choice. Every conversation lately ended in arguments about duty, responsibility, and the future of the monarchy. At the airport, Camilla checked in for her first-class flight to Sydney. The airline staff recognized her immediately, but remained professional. She had chosen this early morning flight hoping to avoid photographers and reporters. For once, she wanted to travel without the usual circus of media attention. The check-in process went smoothly until she reached security. The officer examined her passport carefully, then looked up at her with recognition in his eyes. He made a quiet phone call while she waited, tapping her fingers nervously on the counter. Something felt wrong. After what seemed like forever, the officer handed back her passport with an apologetic smile. "Everything appears to be in order, Your Majesty. Please proceed to the departure lounge." Camilla felt relief wash over her as she gathered her carry-on bag. The departure lounge was surprisingly quiet for such an early hour. Camilla found a corner seat away from other passengers and pulled out a book. But she couldn't concentrate on the words. Her mind kept drifting to Charles, wondering if he had found her letter yet. Would he be angry, hurt? Would he try to stop her? As boarding time approached, Camilla felt a mixture of excitement and guilt. Part of her was thrilled at the prospect of freedom, of spending time with her sister without royal protocols and endless schedules. But another part of her felt like she was abandoning her duties, running away from problems instead of facing them. The gate agent announced first-class boarding, and Camilla stood up with her boarding pass in hand. This was it. In a few hours, she would be halfway around the world, away from the pressures of royal life. She could spend her days walking on the beach, reading books, and having normal conversations with normal people. But as she approached the boarding gate, she noticed unusual activity near the departure area. Several men in dark suits were speaking quietly with airport security. One of them kept glancing in her direction. Camilla's heart began to race. Something was definitely not right. The boarding agent scanned Camilla's pass with a professional smile, but then hesitated. She looked at her computer screen, frowned, and made a quick phone call. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but there seems to be a small delay with your flight. Could you please wait in the VIP lounge for just a moment?" Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't about flight delays. Someone had discovered her travel plans. As she was escorted to the VIP lounge, she caught sight of a familiar uniform in her peripheral vision. Her worst fears were about to be confirmed. Colonel James Morrison of the Royal Protection Service stood in the VIP lounge doorway, his expression serious but respectful. Camilla had known him for years. He had been part of her security detail since she married Charles, always professional, always loyal to the crown. Seeing him here meant only one thing. Charles knew about her escape plan. "Your Majesty," Colonel Morrison said with a slight bow, "I'm afraid I have instructions that prevent you from boarding this flight." His voice was gentle but firm. Behind him stood 2 other royal protection officers, their presence making it clear this wasn't a request. Camilla felt her stomach drop. "On whose authority?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Her voice remained calm despite the storm of emotions building inside her. "His Majesty the King has issued direct orders regarding your travel, ma'am. I'm sorry, but I must ask you to come with us." Morrison's face showed genuine regret. He had always been kind to her, but his loyalty to Charles and the crown came first. The VIP lounge suddenly felt very small. Other passengers in the area began to notice the commotion, though they kept their distance. Camilla could see phones being raised, people trying to take pictures or videos. Within hours, this would be front-page news around the world. "What exactly are your instructions, Colonel?" Camilla asked, setting down her handbag with deliberate calmness. She had learned over the years that showing emotion in public only made things worse. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "I'm to escort you back to the palace immediately. His Majesty wishes to speak with you personally." He paused, then added more quietly, "He's quite concerned about your well-being, ma'am." Camilla almost laughed at that. Concerned about her well-being? Where had that concern been during the months of arguments and cold silences? Where had it been when she tried to tell him how suffocated she felt by royal life? "And if I refuse to come with you?" she asked, knowing it was a futile question but needing to ask anyway. The colonel's expression grew more serious. "Ma'am, I've been given broad authority to ensure your safety and security. That includes preventing you from traveling without proper security arrangements." The message was clear. She could come willingly, or she could be compelled to come. Around them, airport security had quietly formed a perimeter, keeping curious onlookers at a distance. Camilla realized that Charles had thought of everything. He had probably been planning this intervention since the moment he found her letter. "My luggage is already on the plane," she said, grasping for some small victory in this humiliating situation. "It's being removed as we speak, Your Majesty. Nothing has been damaged or searched without your permission." Morrison signaled to one of his men, who spoke quietly into a radio. Camilla looked out the window at the plane that was supposed to take her to freedom. She could see ground crew removing suitcases from the cargo hold. Her escape had lasted exactly 47 minutes from palace to airport. She had gotten so close to leaving only to have it all taken away. The worst part wasn't the embarrassment or the failed escape. It was the realization that she truly wasn't free. Despite her title, despite her position, she was still subject to decisions made by others. Charles could literally prevent her from leaving the country with a single phone call. "Very well," she said finally, picking up her handbag. "I assume my sister in Australia will be told that I won't be arriving?" "All necessary notifications will be made, ma'am." Morrison stepped aside to let her pass, then fell into step beside her as they left the VIP lounge. The walk through the airport felt endless. Despite the security perimeter, Camilla could feel eyes on her from every direction. Passengers, airport staff, and hidden photographers all witnessed her walk of shame. Tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves in her mind. As they approached the airport exit, Camilla saw the familiar black Bentley waiting. The same car that had brought her here with such hope was now taking her back to her gilded prison. She had never felt more trapped in her entire life. The ride back to Buckingham Palace passed in tense silence. Colonel Morrison sat in the front passenger seat, while Camilla stared out the window at London's morning traffic. Common people going about their ordinary lives, free to travel wherever they pleased without armed escorts and royal protocols. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her sister Annabelle, friends and palace staff, but she ignored them all. What could she possibly say? That she had tried to leave but been caught like a teenager sneaking out of the house? The humiliation was overwhelming. When they arrived at the palace, Charles was waiting in his private study. He stood by the tall windows overlooking the gardens, still wearing his morning suit from whatever official engagement had been interrupted by news of her escape attempt. He turned as she entered, his face a mixture of relief and frustration. "Camilla," he said simply, his voice strained. "Thank God you're safe." "Safe?" she repeated, her composure finally cracking. "I was perfectly safe boarding a flight to visit my sister. I was safe until you sent your men to drag me back here like a prisoner." Charles winced at her words. "You left without telling anyone where you were going. No security arrangements, no official notification. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? The only danger was to your precious reputation when people found out your wife had left you," Camilla shot back. Surprising herself with her own boldness, the room fell silent except for the ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Charles looked older than his years, the weight of kingship evident in every line on his face, but Camilla felt no sympathy. She was tired of always considering his feelings while her own were dismissed. "Is that what you think this is about?" Charles asked quietly. "My reputation? Isn't it? Everything is always about the monarchy, the crown, public perception. When was the last time you asked what I wanted, Charles? When did you last care about my happiness instead of my duty? Charles moved away from the window, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture she knew meant he was struggling to control his emotions. I found your letter this morning. Do you know what it felt like to read that my wife had disappeared without a trace? I told you I needed time away. I told you exactly how I felt. You told me you were leaving. You didn't tell me where, or for how long, or even if you were coming back. His voice rose slightly, then he caught himself and lowered it again. The security implications alone. There are always security implications, Camilla interrupted. Every decision, every movement, every breath I take has security implications. I can't even visit my own sister without a military operation. Colonel Morrison, who had been standing silently by the door, cleared his throat. Your Majesties, perhaps I should give you privacy to discuss this matter. No, Charles said firmly. Colonel Morrison, I want you to explain to my wife exactly what protocols were breached today. Camilla felt a flash of anger at being discussed like a misbehaving child. Don't you dare lecture me about protocols, Charles. I'm not one of your subjects. You are the Queen Consort of England, Charles replied, his royal authority creeping into his voice. Like it or not, that comes with responsibilities and restrictions. Restrictions like being forbidden to leave the country. Restrictions like informing your security detail when you travel internationally. Restrictions like considering the constitutional implications of your actions. Restrictions like thinking about what happens to the monarchy if something happens to you. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else, but Charles seemed determined to make his point with witnesses present. I wanted to visit my sister, Camilla said, her voice breaking slightly. I wanted to walk on a beach without photographers hiding in the dunes. I wanted to have a normal conversation over dinner without worrying about what the press would say about every word. Is that really so much to ask? For the first time, Charles' expression softened. He took a step toward her, then stopped as if unsure whether his approach would be welcome. You could have told me, he said more gently. We could have arranged something. When? Between your meetings with Parliament and mine with various charities. During the 5 minutes we see each other between official engagements? Camilla's voice was exhausted now, all the fight draining out of her. We don't talk anymore, Charles. We just perform our roles and pretend everything is fine. The truth hung in the air between them, acknowledged but not yet addressed. Morrison cleared his throat again, more urgently this time. Sir, ma'am, the press has already gotten wind of the airport incident. We need to decide how to handle the media response. And just like that, they were back to managing public perception instead of dealing with their private pain. Within hours, the palace press office was in crisis mode. Photos of Camilla being escorted from Heathrow Airport spread across social media faster than wildfire. Headlines screamed about royal drama, marriage troubles, and constitutional crisis. The phones never stopped ringing. Sir Edmund Hartley, the palace's director of communications, paced the length of his office while briefing Charles and Camilla on the unfolding media storm. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and his tie hung loose around his neck. The Daily Mail is running with Queen Camilla's great escape foiled, he reported grimly. The Sun has palace prison, Camilla stopped at border, and the Times is taking a more serious angle about security protocols and constitutional implications. Camilla sat rigidly in her chair, watching her private moment of desperation being dissected by strangers. Every detail was being analyzed, twisted, and sensationalized for public consumption. The worst part was reading the social media comments that Sir Edmund's staff had compiled for review. Listen to some of these responses, she said bitterly, reading from the tablet in her hands. Maybe she finally realized she doesn't belong in the royal family. Good riddance. Let her go to Australia. Charles deserves better than a woman who abandons her duty. Charles reached over and gently took the tablet from her hands. Don't read those. They don't know you, and they certainly don't know our situation. But they're making judgments anyway, Camilla replied. And their opinions matter more than mine, apparently, since I'm the one who can't leave the country. Sir Edmund cleared his throat diplomatically. Your Majesty, we need to craft a response that addresses the speculation without confirming marital difficulties. Perhaps something about a family visit being postponed due to scheduling conflicts. You want me to lie, Camilla said flatly. I want us to protect the institution of the monarchy while being truthful about non-private matters. Sir Edmund replied carefully. The institutional response was always the same. Protect the crown, Manage the narrative. Never let the public see real human emotions or struggles. Camilla wondered if the previous queens had felt this suffocated, or if she was uniquely unsuited for this role. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Annabelle. Saw the news. Are you okay? My door is always open when you're ready. The kindness in those simple words made tears spring to Camilla's eyes. Charles noticed her emotional response and dismissed Sir Edmund with a gesture. Give us a few minutes, please. We'll discuss the press strategy shortly. When they were alone, Charles moved to sit in the chair next to hers instead of behind his imposing desk. It was a small gesture, but it made the conversation feel less formal, more personal. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, he began slowly, about us not talking anymore. You're right. Somewhere along the way we stopped being husband and wife and became just king and queen consort. Camilla looked at him in surprise. She had expected more lectures about duty and protocol, not this moment of honest reflection. When did that happen? She asked softly. Gradually, I think. Each royal tour, each state dinner, each public appearance. We got so good at playing our roles that we forgot how to just be ourselves with each other. Charles ran his hands through his hair, a gesture that reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with years ago. I feel like I'm disappearing, Camilla admitted. Every day there's less of me and more of this queen consort character I'm supposed to play. I wake up in the morning and have to remember which version of myself I'm supposed to be that day. Charles was quiet for a long moment. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of tourists gathering at the palace gates, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal drama unfolding inside. I never asked if you wanted this life, he said finally. I mean, truly wanted it. Not just wanted to be with me, but wanted everything that came with being queen consort. It was a question Camilla had been avoiding. Even in her own thoughts. She had married Charles knowing full well what it would mean, but she had underestimated how completely it would consume her identity. I wanted to be your wife, she said honestly. I thought I understood what the rest of it would be like, but I didn't. I couldn't have imagined feeling so isolated while being constantly surrounded by people. The irony is that I feel the same way, Charles admitted. King of England, and I've never felt more alone. For the first time in months, they were having the conversation they should have had long ago. Not about duties and protocols, but about their marriage, their happiness, and their future together. A soft knock interrupted them. Sir Edmund's voice came through the door. Your Majesties, I'm sorry to disturb you, but we really do need to address the media situation soon. The palace switchboard is overwhelmed with calls. The outside world was demanding their attention again, pulling them back into their public roles. But something had shifted between them in those few minutes of honest conversation. The next morning brought fresh challenges as international media picked up the story. News crews camped outside Buckingham Palace, and royal correspondents from around the world descended on London. The story had grown beyond simple gossip into questions about the stability of the British monarchy itself. Camilla sat in her private sitting room, watching the morning news with a mixture of fascination and horror. A reporter stood outside the palace gates, speaking earnestly to the camera about unprecedented scenes and constitutional questions arising from yesterday's events. Royal experts are divided about the implications, the reporter continued. Some say this represents a normal marital disagreement blown out of proportion by media attention. Others suggest it reveals deeper cracks in the modern monarchy's ability to balance personal freedom with institutional demands. Lady Sarah Melbourne, Camilla's longtime friend and lady-in-waiting, entered the room carrying a tea service and wearing a grim expression. She had served the royal family for 30 years and had never seen anything quite like this media frenzy. The morning papers are rather brutal, I'm afraid, Lady Sarah said gently as she poured tea, though The Guardian has published a surprisingly sympathetic piece about the pressures faced by modern royal spouses. Camilla accepted the teacup gratefully. What does it say? The columnist argues that royal marriage has evolved from political alliance to genuine partnership, but the institutions haven't caught up. She writes about the impossible balance between personal happiness and public duty. Lady Sarah paused. She also mentions that you're not the first royal spouse to struggle with these constraints. That was oddly comforting. Camilla had often felt like she was failing at something that should come naturally, but perhaps the problem wasn't with her. Perhaps the system itself was flawed. Charles appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day's official engagements. "Good morning. I hope you slept better than I did." The truth was that neither of them had slept well. Their conversation the previous evening had continued late into the night, covering years of unspoken grievances and unmet needs. They had made progress, but there was still much work to do. "Sir Edmund has prepared several options for our public response," Charles continued, settling into the chair across from her. "But before we decide anything, I want to discuss what happens next. For us, I mean. Not for the press or the public." Lady Sarah discreetly excused herself, recognizing that this was a private conversation between husband and wife, not king and queen consort. "I've been thinking about your sister's invitation," Charles said once they were alone. "Maybe we both need some time away from all this." "Not separately, but together." Camilla looked at him in surprise. "You would consider leaving London? What about your engagements, your meetings?" "I'm the king. I can reschedule meetings. The world won't end if I take a few weeks to work on my marriage." He reached across the small table between them and took her hand. "Yesterday, when I realized you were gone, I wasn't thinking about constitutional implications or press coverage. I was thinking about losing you." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep inside her that had been frozen for months. "I wasn't trying to hurt you, Charles. I just felt so desperate for some space to breathe." "I know. And I realize now that my response made everything worse, having you intercepted at the airport like a security threat." He shook his head ruefully. "That was the reaction of a king, not a husband." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both processing the events of the past day and the revelations of their late-night conversation. "If we did go to Australia together," Camilla said tentatively, "what would we tell people? The press will follow us there. We'd tell them the truth, that the queen consort is visiting her sister, and I'm accompanying her for a private holiday. Royal couples are allowed to take vacations." It sounded almost too simple, but perhaps that was the point. They had been making everything more complicated than it needed to be, turning every decision into a crisis of royal protocol. "Sir Edmund won't like it," Camilla observed. "Sir Edmund works for us, not the other way around," Charles replied firmly. "Besides, a joint trip shows unity and strength. It's better optics than having you intercepted at airports." A soft knock interrupted them again. This time it was Charles's private secretary with an urgent message. "Your Majesty, the Prime Minister is requesting a call at your earliest convenience. Apparently there are questions being raised in Parliament about yesterday's events." Charles sighed heavily. The political implications were beginning to unfold. Even their private marital difficulties were becoming matters of state. "Tell the Prime Minister I'll call him within the hour," Charles replied, "and ask Sir Edmund to prepare briefing materials for a potential joint trip to Australia." As his secretary left, Charles turned back to Camilla with a determined expression. "We're going to handle this our way, not the way everyone else thinks we should." For the first time in months, Camilla felt a spark of hope that they might find their way back to each other after all. The phone call with the Prime Minister proved more challenging than expected. Political opponents were already using the airport incident to question the stability of the monarchy and its relevance in modern Britain. Several Parliament members demanded explanations about the use of royal protection services to prevent a British citizen from traveling freely. The opposition is having a field day with this, the Prime Minister explained during their video call. They're calling it authoritarian overreach and questioning whether royal spouses have the same rights as ordinary citizens. Charles listened with growing frustration as politics invaded what should have been a private family matter. Every aspect of their lives was subject to public scrutiny and political manipulation. "What are you suggesting?" Charles asked. "A clear public statement that addresses the security concerns while reaffirming the royal family's commitment to transparency and accountability. Something that shows you're both united and that this was simply a misunderstanding." After the call ended, Charles found Camilla in the garden, walking among the roses that had always been her refuge from palace stress. The autumn air was crisp and she wore a simple wool coat that made her look more like a country wife than a queen consort. "The political fallout is worse than we expected," he told her, falling into step beside her on the gravel path. "Of course it is. Everything we do becomes political." Camilla stopped beside a particularly beautiful yellow rose bush. "Do you remember when we could just walk in a garden without worrying about what it meant for the future of democracy?" Charles smiled sadly. I'm not sure we ever had that luxury, even before marriage. They continued walking in contemplative silence until they reached a secluded bench where they often sat during happier times. The garden offered privacy from palace staff and media attention, a rare opportunity for genuine conversation. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," Camilla began, "about both of us needing time away. But what if the problems follow us to Australia? What if we can't find our way back to who we used to be?" It was a fear Charles shared but hadn't voiced. Their roles as king and queen consort had changed them both in fundamental ways. The question was whether those changes could be reversed or at least balanced with their personal needs. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," he replied. "But we have to try. The alternative is continuing on this path until we lose each other completely." Camilla leaned against his shoulder, a simple gesture that felt profound after months of formal distance. "I miss laughing with you. When did we stop finding joy in things? Probably around the time every laugh became a photo opportunity, and every private moment became a security briefing," Charles answered wryly. As if summoned by their conversation about privacy, Colonel Morrison appeared on the garden path, maintaining a respectful distance but clearly needing to speak with them. "Sir, ma'am, I apologize for the interruption, but we need to discuss travel security arrangements. If you're serious about visiting Australia, we need at least 2 weeks to coordinate with local authorities." Charles looked at Camilla, silently asking if she was ready to commit to this plan. She nodded slightly and he turned back to Morrison. "We're serious, Colonel. Please begin the necessary arrangements. But I want this to be as low-key as possible. Minimal staff, minimal fuss. We're visiting family, not conducting a state visit." Morrison's expression suggested this request would be challenging but not impossible. "I'll coordinate with the Australian authorities and work out a security plan that respects your desire for privacy." After Morrison left, Camilla and Charles remained on the bench, watching the afternoon light fade over the garden. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges as they prepared for their trip and managed the ongoing media storm. "Are you sure about this?" Camilla asked. "Once we announce we're traveling together, there's no going back. Everyone will be watching to see if we can make this work." Charles took her hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that reminded them both of their early courtship days. "I'd rather fail publicly while trying to save our marriage than succeed publicly while losing you." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had said in years, stripped of royal language and political calculation, just a husband talking to his wife about fighting for their relationship. "Then let's go to Australia," Camilla said with the first genuine smile she had felt in months. "Let's see if we can remember how to be happy together." As they walked back toward the palace, the evening news was already reporting on their garden conversation, photographed with long lenses from outside the palace walls. Privacy remained elusive, but for the first time in months they were facing the challenge together. 3 weeks later, Charles and Camilla stood on the balcony of Annabelle's beachfront home in Byron Bay, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and pink. The contrast with London's grey autumn could not have been more dramatic, and neither could the change in their relationship. The journey to Australia had been a media circus, just as predicted. Reporters followed their every move, analyzing their body language for signs of marital discord or reconciliation. But something unexpected had happened during the long flight. They had started talking like they used to, sharing memories and dreams instead of just discussing schedules and obligations. Annabelle had been the perfect hostess, giving them space when they needed it, and providing sisterly support when Camilla struggled with moments of doubt. The beach house offered something Buckingham Palace never could: genuine privacy and the freedom to simply exist without performing for anyone. "I had forgotten what silence sounds like," Camilla said, cradling her morning coffee and breathing in the salt air. Real silence, not just the absence of photographers clicking. Charles nodded, still amazed by how different he felt after just 3 weeks away from royal duties. His staff in London sent daily briefings, but the urgent crises that once demanded his immediate attention somehow resolved themselves without his constant involvement. "Look," Camilla pointed toward the beach, where an elderly couple walked hand in hand along the water's edge. "That could be us in 20 years if we can figure out how to balance everything." It was a future they had both started to believe was possible again. The conversations that had begun on the plane continued on long beach walks, over simple dinners, and during quiet evenings without the pressure of official engagements. They had talked through years of accumulated resentments and unspoken needs. Charles acknowledged how his obsession with duty had made Camilla feel like an afterthought in her own marriage. Camilla admitted that she had sometimes felt jealous of his relationship with Britain itself, as if she were competing with an entire nation for his attention. The breakthrough came during their second week, when they attended a local farmer's market, without any security detail beyond Colonel Morrison discreetly positioned nearby. For 2 hours they were just another middle-aged couple, buying fresh produce and chatting with vendors who treated them as ordinary tourists. "That's what I was trying to get back to at Heathrow," Camilla had told him afterward. "Not the importance of being normal, but the joy of remembering who we are underneath all the titles and responsibilities." Now, as they prepared for their return to London, both felt cautiously optimistic about their future together. They had developed new routines and agreements about protecting their private time and communication. More importantly, they had rediscovered their friendship, which had gotten lost somewhere beneath the weight of crown and protocol. "Sir Edmund called last night," Charles mentioned, watching seagulls dive for fish in the early morning light. "The press coverage has actually been quite positive toward the end. They're calling it a successful reconciliation and praising our commitment to working on our marriage. How ironic that our private struggles became a public relations success," Camilla replied with a wry smile. "Though I suppose if it helps other couples feel less alone in their difficulties, something good came from all the embarrassment." Charles's phone buzzed with messages from London, reminding them that their royal duties awaited their return. But for the first time in months, the thought of resuming those responsibilities didn't fill either of them with dread. "We'll need to be careful not to slip back into old patterns," Camilla said seriously. "It will be easy to get caught up in the demands and forget what we learned here." "Then we'll have to keep reminding each other," Charles replied, taking her hand. "And maybe plan regular escapes even if they're just weekends away from the palace." As they prepared to go inside and begin packing for their return journey, Camilla felt a mix of sadness about leaving this peaceful refuge and excitement about applying their renewed partnership to the challenges of royal life. Dai, woman who had tried to flee to Australia 3 weeks ago, was returning to London as someone different. Still the Queen Consort, still bound by duty and protocol, but now with a clearer sense of her own needs and a husband committed to helping her honor both her role and her humanity. The Royal Sentinel had stopped her from leaving, but perhaps that intervention had saved more than just a marriage. It had saved 2 people who had forgotten how to save themselves.